Imagine serving 20 months in a literal physical prison cell.
Which is a long time.
Right. And not for theft, not for violence, not for any actual action you took in the physical world.
Yeah.
Your total loss of freedom stems entirely from retweeting a cartoon to fewer than 100 followers on a digital platform.
I mean, it immediately sounds like the premise of some dystopian science fiction novel, right?
Completely.
Yet it is a documented contemporary reality.
It really is. So today we're taking a deep dive into this extraordinary case, the case of Dr. Chen Jingyuan, who is a Chinese physics PhD.
Yeah, and he received a 20-month sentence under this incredibly vague catch-all legal charge of picking quarrels and provoking trouble.
But look, what makes our source stack for this deep dive so unprecedented isn't just the case itself. We are simply sitting here reading through standard legal judgments or human rights reports.
No, we're looking at something totally new.
Right. We are looking at a comprehensive audit of a human justice system performed entirely by artificial intelligence.
It's fascinating. The source material is essentially a stress test of human legal logic, but conducted by machines.
Yeah.
So 6 different major AI models. We're talking ChatGPT, Gemini, Grok.
DeepSeek, Qwen, and Copilot.
Exactly. All 6. They were fed the raw case files, the official indictment, the court judgments, and Dr. Chen's own highly unusual blood letter defense.
Which is wild, because he drafted it from his prison cell using, principles of advanced physics and mathematics.
Yeah, it's not your standard legal brief.
Not at all. So our mission today is to unpack this bizarre collision of law, complex systems theory, and psychology, to really understand where the boundaries of free thought are currently being drawn.
It's a heavy topic.
It is. And look, I need to say this up front. Because the source materials analyze the judicial system of a global superpower, they naturally touch on politically charged territory.
Of course.
But what makes this source stack fascinating isn't the politics. In fact, we're explicitly leaving the political debate at the door.
Right. No taking sides here.
Exactly. Our focus is strictly to impartially report on the factual contents and the unfiltered analytical logic generated by these 6 AI models. We're just exploring the ideas within the case files without endorsing them.
Makes sense. And, I mean, the most logical place to begin deconstructing how an entire judicial process can break down is the foundation of the case itself, right? The indictment.
Right. But before we get into the specific charges, we really need to address the methodology of this AI audit. Because as someone who uses these language models daily, my immediate skepticism is about hallucination.
Oh, sure.
AI is notorious for inventing legal precedents or totally misinterpreting complex legal jargon. So how do we know these 6 models didn't just generate a highly articulate defense that completely lacks any real-world legal standing?
Well, it is a vital question, but the prompters mitigated hallucination through a technique that relies on structural consensus.
Structural consensus.
Right. They didn't just ask one model for its opinion. They fed the exact same raw texts into 6 distinct foundational architectures.
Built by different companies, right?
Exactly. Built by different companies with vastly different training data.
Right.
So when ChatGPT, Gemini, Grok, DeepSeek, Qwen, and Copilot all independently isolate the exact same logical fallacies in a legal document?
You're not looking at a hallucination anymore.
Exactly. You are looking at a systemic collapse of logic that is so glaring, any system trained on basic reasoning can spot it. The analysis actually calls it a digital rule of law consensus.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's look at what that consensus actually revealed about the evidence.
No.
Because the prosecution didn't accuse Dr. Chen of organizing a physical riot or, leaking classified state secrets.
No, nothing like that.
The crimes consisted of retweeting political cartoons, like this image of an umbrella girl.
Yeah.
Or he retweeted emotional images, like candles commemorating June 4th.
Yeah.
He even retweeted standard public posts from official accounts, like the U.S. Embassy.
And this is where the AI really went to work. The model Qwen essentially audited the prosecutor's indictment against standard legal frameworks for evaluating evidence. And it assigned the indictment a failing grade.
A failing grade? Like, what was the score?
A 3.0 out of 10.
Wow.
Yeah. Qwen's analysis highlighted that the document was structurally hollow. It completely failed to specify which exact tweets were supposedly illegal or how they met the threshold for criminality.
They just threw a label on it.
Right. They just threw this blanket label of false information over his entire digital footprint.
And Grok's analysis took this historical angle, right? Comparing the indictment to a 2.0 literary inquisition.
Yeah, referring to the historical Chinese practice of persecuting intellectuals just for the subjective interpretation of their writings.
Right. But strictly from a legal mechanic standpoint, or wait, legally speaking, a fake statement has to be a fact that can be proven false, right?
Exactly.
Like if I claim water boils at 50 degrees Celsius, you can empirically prove me wrong.
You can test it.
Right. But you cannot legally classify a cartoon or an emotional sentiment as false information
Yeah.
because it isn't claiming to be an objective, measurable fact in the first place. It's like giving someone a speeding ticket for driving too philosophically. You can't measure it.
That's a great way to put it. And what's fascinating here is that the models, particularly DeepSeek and Gemini, isolated this exact boundary violation.
Okay.
There is an absolute legal distinction between a falsifiable claim and an artistic or emotional expression. A feeling of mourning represented by a candle is an expression.
Right.
A satirical cartoon is an expression. When a legal system categorizes an expression as a false fact, it fundamentally breaks the definition of evidence.
So if the prosecution possessed zero tangible evidence of a fabricated fact, how did this indictment actually survive a judge's scrutiny?
Well, the AI analysis points to a procedural bypass.
A bypass.
Yeah. Instead of applying judicial scrutiny to the evidence, the court relied on something called administrative confirmation.
Meaning what, exactly?
Meaning, the local police administrative body labeled the retweets as false information, and the judicial body simply accepted that administrative label as an unquestionable truth.
Oh, wow.
They completely abandoned their role to independently verify the evidence.
That is wild. And look, this procedural failure sets the stage for what I think is the most bewildering legal argument in the entire source stack.
Oh, absolutely.
Because the court still had the burden to prove malicious intent.
Yeah.
Right? They had to prove that Dr. Chen knew he was doing something illegal and did it anyway.
Right, the mens rea.
Yeah, but they had no emails, no confessions, no witnesses to his state of mind. So they substituted actual proof with a demographic trait. They literally weaponized his intellect.
They did. The documentation reveals the court's core argument was because Dr. Chen is a highly educated physics PhD, he should have known right from wrong regarding the nature of information on the internet.
Unbelievable.
So therefore, his retweets were inherently malicious and intentional.
Hold on. They essentially argued that being smart makes you more guilty, that because he has a PhD, his curiosity is a weapon.
That is exactly what they argued, and Gemini and DeepSeek flagged this as a severe violation of jurisprudence. It's known as objective imputation, or the creation of a status crime.
A status crime.
Yeah, because in a functional legal system, you punish a citizen for their explicit provable actions and their demonstrable psychological intent.
Sure.
Here, the system punished the defendant for his identity, his status as a scholar. It effectively bypassed the requirement for a guilty mind by declaring that intelligence itself implies guilt when dissenting from the official narrative.
That is terrifying. But Dr. Chen's response to this PhD trap is where the case elevates from a legal dispute to just a masterclass in interdisciplinary logic.
Oh, his defense is incredible.
Yeah, writing from his cell, he didn't rely on standard legal defense tactics at all. He used Gödel's incompleteness theorem to dismantle the court's presumption of intent.
Right. And for anyone who needs a quick refresher, Gödel's incompleteness theorem is a foundational pillar of mathematical logic.
It's heavy math.
Very heavy. But in highly simplified terms, it proves that within any sufficiently complex, consistent formal system, there will always be statements that are true, but which cannot be proven to be true within the boundaries of that specific system.
Okay, so to map that onto Dr. Chen's defense, the state's narrative, or the official version of reality, is a formal system.
Yes.
Dr. Chen argued that as a scientist, his foundational training dictates that no single system contains all objective truth.
Exactly.
Therefore, his default psychological state is not to blindly accept the administrative label of truth. His professional and intellectual duty is to probe the unverified, the complex, the seemingly contradictory.
He brilliantly flipped the court's logic right back at them. The court argued his intellect proved he knew the information was false. But Dr. Chen used mathematics to argue his intellect proved he was investigating the boundaries of the information. He demonstrated that scientific skepticism and malicious intent are mutually exclusive psychological states.
Wow. Yet the appeals court, the second instance court, they ignored this logic entirely.
Completely ignored it.
In fact, the AI analysis notes they doubled down. They unlawfully demanded that Dr. Chen provide new evidence to prove his innocence. They completely inverted the burden of proof.
Which is a huge red flag.
Right. Essentially declaring, we presume you are guilty because of your intellect. The burden is now on you to prove otherwise.
And this inversion of the presumption of innocence highlights a deeper anomaly in the case files. When Copilot and DeepSeek analyzed the language of the judgments alongside Dr. Chen's prison writings, they identified a fundamental psychological collision.
A psychological collision.
Yeah, this wasn't just a legal disagreement anymore. It was a clash between two entirely incompatible frameworks of human behavior.
And the models mapped this out using the lens of positive psychology.
Yes, they did.
They constructed a positive psychology strength map for Dr. Chen, revealing that his actions aligned perfectly with the PERMA model of psychological flourishing.
Yes, the PERMA framework. It stands for positive emotion, engagement, relationships, meaning, and accomplishments.
Okay.
If you analyze Dr. Chen's output, even under the intense duress of incarceration, you see an individual displaying intense curiosity, intellectual honesty, a search for profound meaning, and extraordinary psychological resilience.
I mean, drafting a mathematically rigorous defense while confined to a physical cell.
That requires a massive reservoir of psychological strength.
Absolutely. So the AI models then contrasted Dr. Chen's PERMA profile with the psychological framework of the judicial system itself.
Right.
And the models concluded the system operates on a rigid deficit model governed by severe negativity bias and risk amplification.
Yeah, because in a deficit model, an institution does not scan its environment for potential growth or truth or human flourishing.
What does it scan for?
It scans exclusively for threats, vulnerabilities, and deviations from the baseline. Consequently, it becomes fundamentally blind to the utility of positive personality traits.
Wow.
So when a citizen exercises intellectual curiosity or engages in open academic inquiry, the deficit-driven system lacks the capacity to process that behavior as healthy.
It just can't see it.
Right. It can only categorize it as an anomaly, and therefore a potential risk to systemic order that has to be neutralized.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because it functions exactly like a hyperactive autoimmune system in the human body.
Oh, that's a perfect analogy.
Right, because a healthy immune system targets actual pathogens, but an overactive one loses the ability to distinguish between a harmful virus and the body's own healthy tissue.
Exactly.
It becomes so obsessed with mitigating perceived risks that it attacks the very cells responsible for vitality and growth. In this judicial ecosystem, intellectual curiosity and the pursuit of scientific truth were treated as foreign pathogens.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the models summarize this dynamic by stating the institutional structure utterly lacked flourishing compatibility.
Flourishing compatibility. I like that phrase.
It's very precise. The system and the individual were operating in fractured meaning systems. One was driven by character strengths and growth, and the other solely by functional control.
And this obsession with risk amplification brings us to the actual physical mechanics of the charge. The legal system imagined this massive systemic threat. They formally charged him with causing severe public disorder.
They did.
But Dr. Chen is a physicist, and he utilized literal physics to prove that the public disorder the court imagined was a mathematical impossibility.
This part is brilliant because the legal statute for picking quarrels online does not merely criminalize the posting of controversial material.
Right, there's a threshold.
Exactly. The law explicitly requires the prosecution to prove the material caused actual severe public disorder.
Like what?
The threshold generally involves inciting physical riots, causing measurable network paralysis, or hitting highly specific digital metrics, such as generating over 5,000 views or 500 retweets.
Which brings us back to the central absurdity of the entire case. Dr. Chen had fewer than 100 followers.
Yeah.
His posts generated virtually zero engagement. He was basically whispering into an empty digital void.
Right. So, to dismantle the court's assumption of disorder, Dr. Chen introduced the CIP theorem from computer science and the concept of self-organized criticality from physics into his legal defense.
Okay, let's clearly define those mechanisms for everyone, starting with the CIP theorem, because applying distributed network theory to a legal defense is highly unusual.
Very. The CIP theorem dictates that a distributed data store can only simultaneously provide two of three guarantees: consistency, availability, and partition tolerance.
Okay, stay with us here.
I know it sounds dense, but Dr. Chen used this to model the flow of information across the internet. For a single user to cause a network-wide disruption, meaning to force the entire massive system to focus consistently on one piece of information, that user needs massive bandwidth and network influence.
Right, they need a huge megaphone.
Exactly. Dr. Chen argued that his account, with fewer than 100 followers, was a microscopic edge node.
He physically lacked the network weight to override the system.
Yes.
And how did he apply self-organized criticality?
Well, in physics, for a complex system to experience a sudden phase transition, think of a physical avalanche, there must be a critical mass of energy introduced, or the system must already be on the absolute brink of collapse.
Okay.
Dr. Chen mathematically demonstrated that the microscopic energy of a retweet from an isolated edge node simply cannot trigger a systemic phase transition or an avalanche of public disorder in a society of over 1 billion people.
The math just doesn't allow for it.
The math does not allow for it.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? He essentially looked at the prosecution and proved, using the immutable laws of nature, that they were accusing a single snowflake of causing an avalanche on a mountain that had no snow.
That is exactly what he did. Furthermore, the AI models identified what they called a perfect real-world control experiment that validates his physics defense.
Oh, right, the post-release observation.
Yes.
So after Dr. Chen served his full 20-month sentence and was released, his original social media account and those exact same retweets were still online.
They remained entirely active on the network.
And the result? Zero network paralysis.
Zero physical riots.
Zero societal avalanches. The ongoing empirical reality of the internet continues to actively disprove the court's central thesis every single day.
It is an airtight scientific verification that the crime, as defined by the law, never actually occurred.
Wow.
The AI analysis points out that this physical impossibility exposes the ghost element of the prosecution. Lacking any evidence of actual disorder, the courts just fabricated an imaginary consequence.
They conjured the specter of severe public disorder entirely out of thin air.
Exactly, just to justify the application of a pocket crime.
Right. And for those unfamiliar with the term, a pocket crime is basically a catch-all legal charge. It is a vaguely defined statute that authorities can simply reach into their pocket and pull out when they desire to penalize someone, but they lack a specific evidence-based law to apply to the situation.
And Dr. Chen's resistance against this pocket crime is just a profound demonstration of interdisciplinary thinking.
It really is.
He refused to fight a flawed legal battle using only flawed legal tools. He leveraged complex systems theory, mathematical logic, and positive psychology to defend his constitutional rights against an institutional apparatus that was vastly more powerful than he was.
It forces you to reevaluate how we structure arguments in our own lives, right? When human systems become rigidly attached to their own deficit models and they abandon objective truth, relying entirely on the internal rules of the system is a losing game.
You can't win.
No, you have to step outside the system. You have to bring in the laws of physics, math, and objective reality to expose the structural rot.
Which leads us to, really, the most provocative insight generated by this entire AI audit.
Let's hear it.
If you look at the totality of this deep dive, you witness human judges operating within a human institution systematically abandoning logical consistency.
Yeah.
They relied on subjective presumptions regarding his education, they bypassed the fundamental requirement for actual evidence, and they entirely ignored verifiable scientific reality.
Meanwhile, 6 different artificial intelligence models.
Oh, yeah.
Systems of cold synthetic code flawlessly identified those human rights violations.
It's wild. They defended the presumption of innocence, they upheld the boundaries of free expression, and they validated the objective scientific truth of the defendant.
Wow.
It leaves you with a really profound question regarding the future of justice. We constantly worry about the ethics and biases of machines governing humans.
And we talk about it all the time.
But in instances where human institutions become so paralyzed by their own rigid narratives that they can no longer process objective reality, will the ultimate defenders of human rights, constitutional logic, and free thought actually be the machines?
That is a staggering paradox to consider.
Yeah.
You have an individual who lost 20 months of his physical freedom because of a digital interaction. Human justice failed him completely.
Completely.
Yet it was the raw, calculating logic of artificial intelligence that ultimately vindicated his humanity. It makes you wonder, what other invisible injustices are currently locked away in case files, just waiting for a machine to finally read them and point out the truth.
It's a lot to think about.
It really is. And that is all for today's deep dive. We will see you next time.